welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast YouTube channel. As always, I'm joined with Nathan, and we have a busy Easter weekend to discuss. Obviously, Nathan, it hasn't gone as a lot of people had probably hoped it might do, but I wouldn't describe it as catastrophic just yet. Before we talk about the Easter football, how has your Easter been for yourself? I hope you've been ploughing through plenty of Easter eggs.
Yeah, I have been, if I'm honest. I think that it's the time of year where it's quite similar to Christmas in the way that you just don't know what day it is. Yeah. Like Borough playing on Good Friday made me feel like it was a Saturday, and then all the Premier League was on the Saturday, and then you had Liverpool, Arsenal Sunday, and then Borough were back within almost like 24 hours, it felt like.
Yeah.
But yeah, a weekend packed full of football, which is fantastic, and yeah, really enjoyed my weekend. What about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, again, it's probably the best period of the season, and having read up on stats prior to going into this weekend, I've actually realised that typically Borough's Easter period is where everything starts to go wrong. So actually, I don't know why I enjoy it so much, but yeah, I feel like I've watched about 67 football matches in the space of about 3 days. Some good, some bad, and yeah, lots of championship action, and also, as I did mention, plenty of Easter eggs as well. To try and ensure that this podcast doesn't get too negative, I've just got a question before we actually get into the football. I'm basically going to pick a Middlesbrough player. I've got 3 in mind, and I just want you to tell me what type of Easter egg you think they go for.
Yeah.
So I think to start off with, because we tweeted about him cracking his Easter eggs with his head, the first one's Darragh Lenihan. What do you think he opts for?
I think that he's probably quite basic in his choice. It's not going to be any sort of like dime bar off it Easter egg type thing. I think it'll probably be just like a standard dairy milk one, or like a twirl or something like that. Just a standard one, but he probably puts them in a freezer just to make them harder to head, I think.
Yeah, I think, do you know them machines that you sometimes see on like YouTube videos where basically you just put the ball in and it fires it himself?
Yeah.
There's a gym, one of them in his garden, and he's just his wife or his kids or whatever loading up Easter eggs, and him just meeting them in the air and cracking them like that. Also, do you know what? Because he scored yesterday, I've got to ask you about the tree. What do you think he goes for?
Well, I'm going to revert back to Manchester United away last year and a few tweets from the tree, and sort of link this to his choice of beer, because he was out that weekend last year and he was spotted in Yarm with a Peroni in hand, which it's a cultured choice of beer, and I think he's probably got a cultured choice in Easter eggs as well. So I think he's probably, as much as I'm not massively a fan of Nestle Easter eggs, I think that Cadbury's are better.
Yeah.
Probably a Galaxy Man or something like that. I think that's pretty suited to the tree.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I don't know if I had him down as more of a sort of the way that you described Lenihan, just a bit of a basic man. But no, I think given your reasoning, there's every possibility that he might have opted for one of them. And then finally, bit of a curveball. Let's go Marcus Forss.
Marcus Forss.
We don't know a lot about his character. I think we're just sort of basing this off his play style and the fact that he's from Finland. So it could be anything, couldn't it, really?
Well, it could be anything. And I'm gonna sort of stereotype this a little bit with sort of what I envisage as a bit of a Scandinavian / European chocolate bar. But if Milka do Easter eggs, I think he's a Milka man.
Well, I mean, if they do, then I'd seriously like to know where they are from, because they're an absolute staple of any holiday in Europe, aren't they? Milka chocolate.
Unbelievable chocolate bar.
Yeah, they are. They are very good. But yeah, I felt like that was necessary, because obviously we now have to talk about basically Burnley coming to the other side, getting promoted, and just having a right great day out, to be honest. Nothing really great in it for Middlesbrough. I mean, they've been the best team in the division by a long stretch, but they finally got the job done after Millwall's result against Luton. It was just horrible to watch as a Middlesbrough fan, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's not a nice sort of time when another team comes to your home ground and has a party, and when it's a promotion party, it makes it so much worse as well. Especially when a lot of people at the start of the season didn't really know where Burnley were going to go. There was a lot of sort of pundits, and especially on TalkSport, really, saying that Burnley were banging trouble. That appointed company, who, of course, had experience in the past at Anderlecht, but who was relatively inexperienced, especially in England, and whether his style of football was going to work in the Championship or not, and whether this sort of experiment of turning Burnley of old under Sean Dyche, which was pretty much hoofball, player percentage football, to this possession-based, attacking front foot side, whether it was going to work or not. And a lot of people thought that it was going to fly right back in Burnley's face, but it hasn't. It's probably done quite the opposite, hasn't it? They've won this league at a canter, and fair play to them. They've got so much right this season, from the manager to retaining some of the squad from the season that they were relegated, to the recruitment. They've nailed it 100%, really. And you could see that despite Borough massively improving as the season has gone on to the point that we are at now, that Burnley having that pre-season especially, and also having the money to get in the quality that they have, it shows that there are still a few levels apart from fourth place in the Championship to first.
Yeah, they certainly did show that. And truthfully, Nathan, I don't think I fully went into it on the previous podcast, but I've had a strange feeling, I should say, for weeks leading up to this game. And I just felt like we were always going to get a result. I don't know what it was. Potentially the thoughts of Marouane Zamama smashing a free kick in against Southampton. It had all, I mean, I know we spoke about it briefly. It had all the same feelings. Obviously, before the earlier kickoffs in the day, we knew that there was a possibility that it could happen. And then obviously when it was confirmed and there was a chance that they could go up, I don't know. I felt like we were going to be the party poopers and get ourselves back on track. And it was just a bit of a yeah or moment where you think, yeah, actually, no, just slap back down to earth. And that's sort of really how the second half went, because, we get ourselves level, and then obviously they strike that fatal blow. But going back to the team selection, obviously going into the game, a lot of talk prior to the kickoff was basically, I hope Paddy McNair is not in the team. I think it's fair to say he's become the number one boo boy. He's firmly taken that role off Marcus Tavernier. And ironically, it almost feels like earlier on in the season, when we were doing worse, there wasn't one specific player that was really sort of getting it both barrels. But almost since we've done better and then had this recent slip, I don't know if it's being ungrateful or a little bit of greed from our point, not just sort of not referring to us too, but more so as a fan base in general. Because there's been that bump in the road, obviously he's had a lot targeted at him, but actually he retained his place, and the only change actually was the goal scorer at Huddersfield, Marcus Forss, dropping out for Riley McGree.
Yeah, Paddy McNair has taken on that the burden of being the Middlesbrough fans' sort of player to shoot down, really. I think there has always been one in the fan base that is singled out and is pretty much weekly the cause of much debate. And Paddy McNair has taken that on after one performance at Huddersfield that we spoke about last week, in which he was man-marked by Danny Ward, and in a game plan where the manager of Huddersfield knows Paddy McNair, once called him one of the best players in the division and best defenders in the division, knows his strengths, which are quite clearly stepping out from the back with the ball and not defending, I suppose, because he's got the ability to step out. He's not a natural defender. To mark him out the game and let an actual central defender who is good at defending step out with the ball, but not as good on the ball, in Darragh Lenihan, he stepped out, and Paddy McNair was completely nullified in his passing out from the back, and that made his overall performance look so much worse because he couldn't do what he was good at, and what he isn't so good at, he was exposed for in a few instances. But I think that it was pretty fair to retain his place, because, I mean, we now know some sort of context around Dale Fry possibly carrying a little bit of an injury, but also we were playing against a side that, okay, they were going to have the ball, but they would also let us have the ball in some instances. And yeah, we needed a bit of pace in that back line as well to deal with some of the attacking players off Burnley. You look at Zaroury and Teller, especially, both filled with pace in their game. But yeah, going back to the one change, McGree coming back into the side, I think had he not been suffering from a little bit of flu and jet lag prior to the Huddersfield game, he probably would have started that one as well. But yeah, it's an interesting one that it now appears that Aaron Ramsey's definitely the most fancied player in that sort of role, whether that be left or right.
Yeah.
And it's now sort of a toss-up between McGree and Forss, who, prior to Aaron Ramsey coming into the football club, those two did a fantastic job for us, both with Riley McGree playing predominantly on that left-hand side and Forss down the right. But McGree has now sort of played both left and right. But yeah, I thought it was fair that he came into the side, but it was always going to be a struggle for those players to get on the ball as often as we've seen them doing in games, because Burnley were going to dominate the ball a lot more than sides in this division that we've played against have done. Burnley just so good at ball retention, just looks so comfortable. And I thought the changes were... I think that people get drawn into reading the team news a little bit too much. It wasn't entirely shocking to me that Paddy McNair retained his place, but because he's now Middlesbrough's number one boo boy, a lot of the fan base just appear to sort of muddy his name a little bit, that it's in the team. So it's unfortunate, really, that it's a
shame,
so much
because obviously we even covered it last week, talking about how realistically, up until after this international break following the Huddersfield game, we have said countless times on the podcast this season, pretty much, if it's Fry or if it's McNair, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. If anything, McNair's strengths probably benefit the team a little bit in terms of his ability, as you say, to come out from the back with it. And some would argue, and I would completely agree, to be honest, that actually first and foremost, a defender, especially a central defender's responsibility, is to basically stop danger, head balls, and basically make sure the strikers aren't dominating and basically just protect the goal. And yeah, that is, I think everyone knows that that's Dale Fry's strength. He's a more traditional centre-back, but yeah, it's not like for the whole season or for the full of Michael Carrick's tenure that everyone's been saying, well, Paddy McNair's this, that and the other, because when we were winning games, there wasn't a problem. But yes, okay, he hasn't been in great form, but actually having watched the goals back and following even the Burnley game, I think there's just as much of a case as to Darragh Lenihan actually being just as poor in the previous two games. But anyway, before we sort of go off on a full tangent on who should be playing centre half and all of that, we should probably actually get into the action. And it's actually not a centre half that causes the problem for Middlesbrough here. It is, unfortunately, in his case, Mr. Reliable up until the last two games, Tommy Smith. I think it was quite clear to see with Zarori that he went in with the mentality of hit him hard, hit him early, and hopefully he'll shy away for the rest of the game. And unfortunately for Tommy Smith, I think Zarori's made of sterner stuff than that and has a little bit better of a mentality, to the point where it just wasn't the case. And actually, the first time that Smith tries to send him into row Z and get nice and tight and hit him hard from behind, he completely misses the tackle, and actually it sets Burnley away to go and get their opener.
Yeah, it does. It was very much of the typical, as you say, let him know that you're there early. And Zarori, the ball breaks for him from the tackle and gets him beyond Tommy Smith, and he has the freedom of Burnley's left-hand side to travel up that line and knocks the ball inside. Burnley move it, and within two passes, Brownhill's shot is, I was going to say deflected, but it's not actually, because Barnes does well to redirect it beyond Stefan. And Burnley find themselves 1-0 up. However, I don't care what anyone tells me, Ashley Barnes is offside. And Borough probably shouldn't be 1-0 down here. It did feel like at the time, although we aren't right alongside the sort of 18-yard box in our seats, Chris, it did feel like Barnes was offside at the time.
Yeah, it definitely looked like it at first glance, 100%.
Yeah, but the linesman evidently feels like he had a better view, didn't give it. Barnes wheels away. Burnley 1-0 up within 15 minutes or so. And Borough start slowly a little bit at the start of this half and find themselves 1-0 down early on. Didn't really have too many chances that were clear cut in the first half. There was a few sort of nervy moments for Burnley, possibly, where they try and play out from the back, and Borough possibly made it a little bit too close for comfort.
I mean, the early chance from Akpom wasn't what felt like after about 10 seconds, but he just couldn't really sort his feet out, unfortunately, for the tube train.
Yeah, possibly should have laid in Archer as well, who was coming alongside and would have been able to fire that one with his right foot. But yeah, Tuber instead opts to go with that left foot, and it doesn't quite go for him. But yeah, Borough failed to have a shot on target in the first half anyway, and quite comfortably could have found themselves 2-0 down or down to 10 men when a header sort of goes beyond Darragh Lenihan. He doesn't know that Nathan Teller is right on his tail and about to take the ball off him and go through one-on-one with Stefan. He does get on the wrong side of Lenihan, takes the ball off him. Lenihan looked like he was going to bring him down, which would have been catastrophic. It would have killed the game 100% had Borough gone down to 10 men. And instead, he has to let Teller go and just hope that he bottles it pretty much and doesn't have the composure to slot it beyond Stefan. And luckily for Borough, he slides it past Stefan, but past the near post, which was a moment where I think that a lot of Borough fans breathed a sigh of relief, and especially Darragh Lenihan will have done as well, because it was a massive chance. And had Teller put that one away, it would have killed the game quite comfortably within half an hour. But to get in at half time at 1-0 felt quite lucky. And me and yourself, Chris, had a conversation at half time. Couldn't see how Borough would even get a goal in this game, never mind get a result. And we thought that Burnley would go on and extend their lead and get what would be a vital victory that sent them over the line to promotion. But Borough did make a fist of it within 2 minutes of the restart and found themselves back level, didn't they, Chris?
Yeah, they did. And it's interesting that you say that, because I think I distinctly remember the words that come out of my mouth were, it's just not a game where I feel like we're going to score. And actually, it's something that I want to touch on later. We'll touch on it later about basically this team's ability to score. And yeah, it come as somewhat of a shock to me, to be honest, especially how quickly we started in the second half. I know it was a bit of a theme earlier on in Michael Carrick's reign, where we'd basically be not very good in the first half and then come alive in the second half. And it felt like that's exactly what we did. I think it initially comes from a Giles ball into the box. It looks like Akpom's going to head it, and Mirik basically comes out and cleans him out, which, in fairness, I thought could have potentially been a penalty. There's a little bit of a mix-up. Ball falls to Archer. And I think he's actually basically lofted the ball from his right over to his left. And I think he's going to try and strike it with his left. And then there's, having watched it back, not actually that much contact. He goes to ground, and obviously the referee points to the spot. Do you know what? In real time, I thought it was as blatant as a penalty that I've ever seen. However, if you watch the replays, I'm really not sure it actually is.
Well, I know that I'm slightly closer to the pitch than you are, Chris, but watching this and having sort of the view of, I could see Archer from the side and could see Cullen coming in to sort of make the tackle. When the referee pointed to the spot, I said, it's just never a penalty in a million years. I think he's tripped himself, really. I think his legs have got caught in a tangle as he's trying to adjust himself to fire the ball towards goal, and he's pretty much kicked himself and gone down, and the referees give it. And I actually think that maybe after giving this one, the referees possibly tried to even things up later in the game, because there was another one with Archer that was probably more of a penalty than that one. But anyway, Borough get the penalty, and it felt like our conversation at half-time had just been blown up.
Yeah.
Our faces within about 2 minutes, and Tuba steps up. I have my brother behind me telling me, oh, well, he missed one against Burnley earlier on in the season. And I thought, just shut up. Yeah. And Tuba steps up, smashes it into the corner. And it felt at that time, from being convinced at halftime that there was no way back into the game, despite the game only being at 1-0, that within 2 minutes, Borough were back level, and it felt like the game was only going to go in one way. But Burnley did remarkably well to remain composed, as champions would do, remain composed and calm, settle themselves down, and get the game back on an even playing field in terms of momentum, and then swing the pendulum back in their favour, which they did do after about 20 minutes following that goal, down the right-hand side this time. And it sort of sparked massive debate on social media prior to the game, as we've spoken about. Everyone battering the decision to keep Paddy McNair at the centre of defence, and a ball is dinked down the side of Borough's left-hand side for Teller, and he drives towards the byline, drives past Johnny Howson, squares the ball, and Connor Roberts slots in. But in the build-up to this goal, Lenihan raises his hand to call Teller offside, which it kind of looked like he would be. But then the still image shows that Paddy McNair is the man to play him onside, with Ashley Barnes alongside McNair. And then the ball is crossed into the box, and Connor Roberts runs free. He's in between two Borough players. McNair doesn't close him down quite quick enough, and he slots in neatly. Okay, McNair's played him onside, and that is a massive problem, because had the two centre-halves been in communication with each other well enough, they both would have stepped up. Teller would have been offside, and the chance doesn't happen. But Teller's free down Borough's left-hand side, and looking at the build-up to the goal, and where the man who should be marking Nathan Teller, Burnley's right winger, should be, Ryan Giles is instead letting Teller roam free with the freedom of Burnley's right-hand side, behind him whilst he tries to block the pass, stood square on, doesn't look set, doesn't know where Teller is. And Borough are all over the place. Johnny Howson has to come over and deal with Teller, or at least attempt to. He fails to do so. Teller gets across, put in, and Roberts, who is also on Burnley's right-hand side, is able to roam free into the box. No sign of Ryan Giles, no sign of Aaron Ramsey. The usual trackers there on that left-hand side for Borough. A goal that, again, is a goal where you can see the flaws, you can pick out errors from certain players. And I actually can't remember the last Middlesbrough goal where I can just say that the opposition have done really well and scored a goal that comes from their actual quality, where from every other goal that we seem to concede comes from a stupid error. But yeah, Borough find themselves 2-1 down, and we'll get on to Connor Roberts after you give your say on the goal, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't want to sort of add to the pylon on Paddy McNair, but as a central defender, it's pretty unforgivable not stepping up. It's one of the basics of that role. And look, it's not just him at fault, but it's really bad. It is, and he'll know, but it's really, really bad. He just needs to step up with Lenihan. Then obviously you've got the matter of Giles, as you spoke about. And listen, I think we all know by now that Ryan Giles' main attribute is attacking ability and his delivery. And I know, again, first and foremost, potentially he should be considered as a defender. He's a left back, but I mean, if you watch any modern games, really, your fullbacks are more of an attribute to go forward for the majority of the time. You only need to look at Trent Alexander-Arnold and some of the stuff that gets thrown his way to see that. But nevertheless, it's still really poor, isn't it? He's sort of caught in no man's land. His body position isn't very good, and he's very high up the pitch when one of the most dangerous wingers in the league is just ran off him. I mean, as you say, I don't think he has a clue where he is. But I guess in this sense, you probably say the root cause is the fact that McNair hasn't stepped up. And if he does, Teller doesn't even get the chance to put the ball into the box. Just a rubbish goal to concede, very frustrating. And then, truthfully, at the time, I was adamant that it was Josh Brownhill that had scored. Only to then hear the stadium announcer then confirm that it was actually Connor Roberts. Obviously, as soon as they scored, I think I might have even put my head in my hands, so I didn't really see sort of the full celebration. Anyway, on the way back from the match, I just basically want to watch the goals back. Quickly realised that Connor Roberts has actually took it upon himself to run past the south stand with his finger, I should say, to his lips. Now, listen, Connor Roberts joined Middlesbrough, Gary Monk, as I think he was second choice right back. Made zero to no impact on the team. He played once at Leeds away, I seem to remember, and played in a cup game against Scunthorpe. Was near enough anonymous in that, and then also was, from what I remember, dreadful at Leeds away. So I don't know where the chip on his shoulders come from to shush the home fans, but it's just embarrassing. It doesn't reflect well on him at all. yeah, okay, fair enough. He scored the goal that's got Burnley promoted, and he's been very good for them this season. But I mean, to shush the home fans for whatever reason that he seemingly decided to do so, it's just pathetic. I actually, and do you know what's worse, Nathan? I thought I actually liked him from the iconic Borough meme video, Ramsden's Currency Challenge. Him and Dale Fry, great chemistry on the video. Dale Fry shows his academic attributes, and it's a really funny video. I thought, yeah, he's a likable character, fair play. But actually, he's just made himself look like absolute, I mean, for want of a better word, dickhead, really, hasn't he? I don't know why he's done that. And after the result, following the second defeat on the bounce, the first time that basically Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough hasn't bounced back after a defeat. And that just added salt to the wounds. And yeah, I am salty, massively salty. But it spun my head, to be honest. And yeah, it just really, really got to me more than it probably should have.
Yeah, I mean, I was the same issue. I didn't know that he'd scored the goal. I still didn't know he'd scored the goal, even when the announcer announced it, because I didn't listen. I wasn't listening. I thought it was actually Cullen that scored. But yeah, I mean, you have to like rate it a little bit, but just like what you're doing, you played 2 games or whatever for Middlesbrough, and I was actually at the Leeds away game, and oh my god, he got absolutely battered by Alioski, who used to play for Leeds. Yeah, he was shocking that day, but anyway, yeah, he's bound to have improved since then, and yeah, we'll see what he's like in the Premier League next season when he's playing against some really tricky winners. We'll see if he even gets a game for Vincent Kompany's side. But anyway, yeah, Connor Roberts, just funny little man. But anyway, yeah, Burnley did really well. Got themselves promoted at the Riverside. It would have been the funniest moment ever if Chuba Akpom had scored that header in something like the 96th minute. But it wasn't to be. Burnley get promoted. They deserve it. It doesn't matter that they did it at the Riverside. They were being promoted anyway. They're about 25 million points clear of everyone else. I think had Michael Carrick been in the door at the start of the season at Middlesbrough, the gap between us and them would be a lot closer than it is. We'd probably be above Sheffield United as well, in fairness. But yeah, it's one of them things. Burnley done really, really well for themselves. And yeah, you've got to take your hat off to them. They've been the best team in the league by country mile this season. The best team that I've seen in possession going forward, in both games as well, to be fair. The game at the Turf was, difficult watch, especially with it being Borough on a good roll. And I thought, well, we'll see what we're truly made of. Go 1-0 up and then get battered for half an hour. But yeah, Burnley, hats off to them. Can't see them being in the Championship in the near future either, because they just look set in terms of the recruitment model, in terms of Vincent Kompany, and fair play to them, especially for beating Sheffield United as well last night, which was fantastic, because as much as this automatic race is done, Paul Heckingbottom's a freak. So anyway, we move on to Bristol City. Another difficult game, this time on Easter Monday, the quick turnaround. And I was thinking about this time last season, as we mentioned at the start of the podcast, Borough on the Easter weekend are historically crap, pretty much. And what stuck out in my mind last year was Good Friday against Carlos Corberan's Huddersfield, which was as painful a watch as pretty much you could possibly get. And then that weird man failing to quash rumours regarding his future, and then going to pretty much promoted Bournemouth on the Easter Monday, taking a point, watching Aaron Connolly have a cardio session for 90 minutes and watching the Sol Bamba show. So, yeah, that's my my memories of last year. But the hope was that Borough had bounced back from a pretty rubbish defeat on the Good Friday. Although it's to the best team in the league, it's not nice to watch teams celebrate at your home ground and go away from home and do something and hopefully get a result. And Michael Carrick rung the changes once again. In the previous game, we saw Marcus Forss drop out and Riley McGree come in. In this game, the roles were reversed. McGree dropped out, Forss comes in. And another change that was possibly a shock was Cameron Archer dropping to the bench and the big tree leading the line for Middlesbrough. But once again, I don't even think it needs touching on really. But the Middlesbrough Twitter blew up once again. Oh, Paddy McNair starting. Oh, dear God. Oh, my God, Dale Fry's not even in the squad. Yeah. Now we know Dale Fry has got a little bit of an injury. Hence why he probably didn't come into the side on Friday as well, and he was only left on the bench. But there you go. Everyone has now sort of been put in the place and knows that Dale Fry's been carrying a little bit of a knock. So there's that. But Chris, what were your thoughts on the McGree and Forss change once again, but mainly on the big tree leading the line?
Yeah, it was a shock, as you say. And it's actually a strange one because I think me and you were having this conversation not so long ago, and actually we both agree, and I think most would, to be honest. It'd be interesting to see who people thought. But actually, since George Friend, I think the big tree is our best signing, bar none, in terms of value and in terms of what he's contributed. And it's been difficult really seeing him not sort of regularly get game time, because whenever he does play, whether he doesn't really play too well or he has a great game, he always just seems to contribute with goals or assists. I think we compared him to Marouane Fellaini not so long ago when he first started playing up top as that 9 before Archer arrived. But yeah, I say the last few weeks, it's not the last few weeks, the last 2 games just felt like sort of something needed freshening up a little bit. And I had a slight feeling that it may have been Barlasa for Hackney, given that I personally felt that Hackney looked a little bit sluggish against Burnley. Listen, he's been absolutely phenomenal since he come into the team. I just felt that he looked quite tired, and obviously, given the fact that he's never really had a rest because of the fact that he's joined up with Scotland on 2 or 3 occasions now, I think. I just felt that he could have done with potentially a seat on the bench for 1 game at least. But no, Carrick opted with Big Crooksy, and I wasn't massively against it, to be honest. As I say, I felt like it wasn't so much personnel. I think there's certain members of the team where you just think there's absolutely no chance that they'd lose their place unless it was through injury. Giles, Lenihan, obviously Howson as well, and then Akpom really are the sort of mainstays. But yeah, I was quite happy to see him in there. A lot of people weren't too sure about the decision, but as I say, it felt more to me as though Carrick just wanted to freshen the dynamic, give us something a little bit different, and just try and see a change in performance from that. And I should say, I don't actually think we performed terribly in the second half against Burnley, but, you know, given 2 defeats on the bounce, I think it was probably needed. So, yeah, obviously in the end, a good decision, but I'm sure we'll talk about sort of Crooks' performance prior to his goal. But yeah, and then obviously on the McGree for forced change, I don't think Riley McGree looked quite right against Burnley, failed to sort of have the impact that he has done. And obviously Marcus Force, we've seen what impact he can have in terms of goals and assists. So yeah, happy with both of those. Going into the game, Nathan, well, I mean, it was... I want to say typical Borough, to be honest, because that Easter weekend, again, Bristol City away, we spoke of how bad of the ground it is historically for us. And when Bristol City take the lead, you start to think, well, actually, it's just going to be another one of those days. And bearing in mind, Tuber had missed a phenomenal chance just prior to that. Yeah, it had all the feelings of somewhat of a disaster, to be honest.
Yeah, it did. It was a strange one, really, because we didn't necessarily start awfully, but the first chance of the game is Borough having to clear off the line twice, with Darragh Lenihan blocking Cornick's shot. Then Borough have that chance through Tuber, who has to score. It's a sitter, really. Free header, probably about 6 yards out, and a player in his form will be furious with himself that he's missed that chance. And then you have the chance with I think it is actually Cornick again. In which Borough trying to play out. In this instance, it's Hayden Hackney that loses the ball, and it breaks. Bristol get the shot off, and my God, Zach Steffen pulls off an unbelievable save that keeps it 0-0. But then there was a period in the game where there wasn't a whole lot going on. Both sides had a few bits of possession. Borough trying to work ways down the left-hand side. At times, Aaron Ramsey did well to lane Giles, because that ball down to the byline was constantly on. It was always on. And at times he did well to mix it up and sort of pretend to play the pass and then drive inside and then play the pass. But other instances, he was being read and tackled. But yeah, we find ourselves 1-0 down on the stroke of half-time, and it's a crap goal to concede. It really, really is. Darragh Lenihan slips, and the ball sort of just... I can't even explain what really goes on. It breaks in favour of a Bristol player. And then McNair tries to account for Lenihan's sort of slip, and then the ball bouncing off Lenihan by diving into a tackle. Then the ball, I think McNair actually wins it, but it ricochets back off the Bristol player into Vyman, who then flicks it beyond Smith, who's come round on the cover to dive in, and it's neatly passed into Bell, who he's literally got the freedom of Ashton Gate, and he just slots it. underneath Stefan, but Bristol City find themselves 1-0 up going into half-time. And yeah, it was not good to go into half-time 1-0 down, and it wasn't good for my heart either.
Yeah, at this stage, obviously, I was receiving messages from you, basically just convinced that, in typical Borough fashion, that we were going to drop out the playoffs. And I don't think I know you didn't truthfully mean any of it, but I think just the result and the Easter period was getting the better of you. And yeah, it was. It wasn't pleasant for anyone, but I think you especially were very, very concerned. But yeah, as you say again, it's just a rubbish goal to concede. Just so many defensive errors. And yeah, as you say, by the time the ball actually hits the net, I mean, Bell, I think, could have nipped off for a cup of tea, had a few dunks of a couple of biscuits, cracked an Easter egg with his head, gone to the shop, got another Easter egg, and then put the ball in the back of the net. And I think McNair, Lenihan and Smith would have still been playing frozen statues, to be honest with you. Not frozen statues, musical statues. But yeah, it's rubbish. That's the best way of summing it up, to be honest. It's just a catalogue of errors. And then we go in at the break, obviously 1-0 down. Expect Carrick to really, really tear into them, to be honest, and get them going. I know it's not his style, but listen, 2 defeats on the bounce, given the context of that it is Burnley, I think would have been somewhat, I don't want to say expected, because you don't go into any game wanting or assuming that you're going to get beat. But listen, Burnley have beaten just about everyone else in the division this season. So, I mean, it's kind of understandable. But then to go to Bristol City, who have got nothing to play for, let's be honest. One of their brightest sparks of the season is out through injury. You've got to see it as somewhat of an opportunity. And that would have obviously made it 3 defeats on the bounce. So, yeah, when they get their second so soon after half-time, and we started not very well in the second half. I mean, not that it would have, but as a football fan and as a Middlesbrough fan, you immediately think the worst and pretty much assume that it's become a small crisis, really, don't you?
Yeah, you do. At half-time, I was scrolling through Twitter and I'd seen a Borough fan laughing at Derby County. They drew at home with MK Dons yesterday, so it's not all bad. But yeah, about them taking the mick out of us for finishing 7th and at 1-0 down at half-time, I said, I actually replied to the lad and said, we might finish 7th, yeah, if we're not careful. And yeah, Borough sent out early for the second half. The Sky coverage caught that. The Borough team out on the pitch, doing some passing warm-ups, waiting for Bristol City. And I thought, all right, well, hopefully we start quickly. Within 20 seconds, we'd given away a free kick, and Naki Wells had an effort on goal in a dangerous area. And then on 49 minutes, Borough concede the second of the game. And again, defensively, in terms of errors, absolutely diabolical once again. Smith loses the ball in midfield. Johnny Howson tries to win the tackle, does win the tackle, but passes it to a Bristol City player. Then a ball's played in behind, and it looks like Borough comfortable from here on in. The ball's been played in behind. Ryan Giles has done really well, got himself back on the cover, and all he needs to do is pass the ball back to Stefan, and then we're cleared and we're back steady then. win the second balls, and we can hopefully get ourselves back up the pitch and on the hunt for an equaliser. Ryan Giles instead tries to take a touch of the ball inside. His touch is horrendous. The ball's won back off him, played out to Bell. Bell gets his shot off. Stefan makes a good save down to his left-hand side to try and tip it around the post because it is going in. Naki Wells comes in. He could tap it in himself, but instead he opts to square it to Cornick, who taps in from a yard. And yeah, the quick start that we hoped for at the start of the second half was nowhere to be seen, really. And I'm not going to lie, it did feel like we were going up in flames, truthfully. But thankfully, from then on, we seemed like the better side, really, which was quite strange. We conceded that daft goal. And then we grew into the game and somewhat strangely looked like we could get ourselves back into the game and possibly even win it, really.
Yeah, it was strange. Even the patterns of play, our ball retention, doing the things that everyone has come to expect from this Middlesbrough side. It was almost like it had just been, someone had flicked a switch and just said, remember, lads, you are actually really good at football when you do this. And they all went, oh, yeah, we should probably do that, actually. And then all of a sudden, we start playing our usual game under Carrick. And we pull one back. I must say, in fairness to Tommy Smith, it's a really decent cross. I think sometimes he gets into those areas and doesn't deliver as well as potentially he should. But it's a lofted one, chipped to the back stick. And Aaron Ramsey channels his inner Massimo Macaroni, diving header at the back post. Really, really good finish. And from that point, truthfully, as I say, there was almost like the flick of a switch, and you just felt, well, we've got enough time here to get an equaliser, and we've potentially even got enough time to go on and get all 3 points here, because it's the best way to describe it, a flick of a switch, and immediately we just looked like the team that was sweeping aside teams in this division with absolute ease, to be honest.
Yeah, as you say, great ball by Smith, stood up to the back post, and Aaron Ramsey comes flying in, great diving header into the bottom corner, and gets us back into the game. And you look at the clock and you see 58, and you think, we've got like half an hour to get an equaliser here. And I mean, I was just hoping for an equaliser more than anything, get us back into the game and then see where it takes us, really. And it didn't take long to get that equaliser. 6 minutes. 6 minutes after Aaron Ramsey's goal to reduce the deficit. Borough get the leveller through the big tree. Great play from Ramsey and Tuba. Ramsey lays it into Akpom. Akpom gives it back. Ramsey just beats, I think it was Matty James, to the ball to sort of prod it in behind for Crooks. He's one-on-one. He takes his touch to steady himself, and then he neatly slots it into the corner, sends the Borough fans behind that goal wild, gets us back level. And you look at the clock again, 64 minutes, and you think, well, here we go. 25 minutes to go, plus added time. Prior to the goal, you'd seen Michael Carrick called to the bench. Cameron Archer's stripped and ready. Anthony Dykesteel is stripped and ready. And building up to that goal, there was well, it was the apparent change was going to be Matt Crooks off, Cameron Archer on, and Tommy Smith off, and Anthony Dijksteel on. Big Tree gets that goal, gives himself a few more minutes on the pitch before we see Cameron Archer. Unfortunately, Anthony Dijksteel does not get his run out, which I feel possibly would have got us a winner in the game. But I think, given the context, pulling us back from 2 goals down to snatch a point, I think that most Borough fans would have taken that, given the situation we found ourselves in after 50 minutes. But yeah, a great finish by Crooks. The best moment of his performance in the game, because once again, in this Matt Crooks striker performance, Twitter blew up quite a lot at halftime to say that the Matt Crooks striker experiment should not happen again, and Matt Crooks leaves Borough fans with eggs firmly on their faces as he gets Borough back into the game. Yeah,
it's quite remarkable, really, that he's got this knack of just shutting people up, and I almost enjoy it. And listen, I'm by no means saying that he didn't do the exact same to me, because truthfully, it was probably one of his worst performances in a Middlesbrough shirt that I can remember. He didn't really get involved. There was one incident where he was wide, could have laid it off to Giles. I think he tried a turn and just basically kicked the ball out of play. But then, yeah, he goes and does what he does best, gets us level, gets his goal. And it's strange, because with his goal-scoring presence, you almost feel like you want him in the team, but currently there's not really that role for him, and it is going to be him or Archer. And even when Archer come on, I thought we looked more dangerous with that ball in behind. And obviously, I mean, we're probably centimetres or inches away from Archer doing exactly what he was sent on to do in the end. But yeah, I've seen a few people talking about potentially dropping Crooks back into midfield and taking Hackney off. And it might be an interesting experiment. He played in a sort of similar pivot, I think, with Piero towards the back end of Warnock's reign last season, and actually was quite effective there. But you do also take away a little bit of his goal-scoring threat. But yeah, it's a nice position for Carrick to be in, but just unfortunate that, really at the moment, there's not a position where it would look sort of like it would be the right fit to, throw him in instead of Force or something, because he would just look uncomfortable on the right. But yeah, brilliant to see him get on the score sheet. And actually, something that I touched on earlier in terms of our goal scoring ability, I know after the Huddersfield game, we were talking about sort of like the typical Borough tagline, and we thought this Middlesbrough team were different to that tagline. And actually, in some ways, yes, okay, they let us down a little bit against Huddersfield, and Burnley's what it is. But one thing that is just not typical Borough at all, even at 2-0 down yesterday, I almost knew we were going to score. And that's always a nice position to be in as a Middlesbrough fan, when over the years, I mean, really, you would go into games, and even if we hadn't gone 1 or 2 goals down yet, you'd think we'd struggle to score a goal. We never really had a pattern of play or an attacking threat like we do now. But one major positive about this team is, even when they do find themselves in a position, you always feel like they'll give themselves a lifeline and make it difficult. And obviously we saw that against Burnley. Yes, we got beat, but we found an equaliser when it didn't look like we were going to at all. And then yesterday, to come from 2 goals behind, especially at Ashton Gate, which, yes, I know there's no science behind certain grounds, but I mean, historically, we just never, ever perform there. And actually, having slept on it, I actually feel an awful lot more confident going into the Norwich game than I actually did even at full time yesterday. I think those 2 goals could prove to be so beneficial just in terms of keeping the spirit amongst the group and actually retaining the confidence that they've built up, because they know what they can do and they proved it. And to put a positive spin on it, it is a really, really good trait of this Middlesbrough team that they score goals. They always seem, and touch wood, by the way, they always seem to find a way to get themselves back into games, or at least just score a goal.
Yeah, they do. And I'm not going to lie, I thought that the typical Borough was kicking in yesterday when we went 2-0 down. But to see the sort of resilience and character to battle back from 2 goals down with 40 minutes or so left on the clock, and the chips are down a little bit. You've been beat in your last 2 games since the international break. You're 2-0 down here, and you're looking down the barrel of 3 defeats in a row with a very difficult final 5 games coming up against teams that are either in and around the playoff picture or teams that are fighting for their lives a little bit down there. When you look at Rotherham away, it was massive to get ourselves back into that game, and we did just that. And I think, looking at the context of the table as well, it was so important to get that goal, because it's another point on the board for Borough, and it extends our lead over 5th and 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th place, because the battle for the 5th and 6th spot at the minute is massive, and we do not want ourselves being drawn anywhere near that with 5 games to go and the difficult run that we've got. So now the gap between us and 5th and 6th and 7th is 6 points, which is huge. And with teams in and around those spots still having to play each other, it's massive to have that lead there. And yeah, I think that getting that point on the road, and now having 2 home fixtures back to back, where, just having a look at the stats there, we've picked up 29 points away from home and 39 points at home. It's massive to be at the Riverside. And Friday night was the first time that we've been beat at the Riverside in the league under Michael Carrick, and he'll want to bounce back from that. We all want to bounce back from that, and it's not going to be a difficult task. It's not going to be an easy task. It will be a difficult task. I'll tell you that now. It definitely will be a difficult task. With Norwich City.
Just before I'm happy to skip over it because the moment nearly gave me a heart attack. But before we do move on to Norwich, we should obviously mention the fact that actually we nearly threw the whole thing away, and we could have really been in the depths of depression, because Zach Vinner, how he misses, I've got no idea. Free kick comes in, he's a yard out, 2 yards out, and somehow manages to hit the bar. I mean, yeah, how he misses, I don't know, but that's absolutely fine that he missed.
Yeah, I was lost for words at the time, seeing the initial footage of it. But then there's an angle that shows, I can't remember who the deflection comes off, whether it's a Bristol player or a Borough player, but there's a slight flick on from someone that, instead of the ball, which is literally arrowing towards his thigh, which would have allowed him to be able to direct the ball goalwards. It sort of hits like his groin area, and it sends the ball onto the crossbar and over, and sigh of relief territory or what. But Borough get out with a point, and hopefully that sets us in good stead for the visit of Norwich City on Friday night. The Friday night football, Borough on Sky every bloody week from now till the end of the season. Friday night, 8:00, under the Riverside lights, on the Sky cameras, for everyone in the playoff picture to watch on with eager eyes as these two sides, who are both trying to get in the top six, take each other on. It promises to be a really good game, and Norwich are one of the strangest sides, I think, that are going in the Championship. I mean, started off this season as probably one of the promotion favourites, really, as they usually are in the Championship. They've made easy work of it the last two times that they've been in the division, and to make it third time lucky to complete the hat trick of Championship wins, they needed to be at the best, and they've had a season where we've seen them play really well and they've gone on some good winning runs, but then they fall foul and they hit a bit of a tricky patch of form and they go off the boil for a little bit. And I think the word that sticks out is inconsistency, and that's found them probably not where they want to be. They probably wanted to at least be firmly in the playoffs by now, and they found themselves in a race with Blackburn, Preston, Sunderland, unfortunately, and a few other sides that are still in the mix, Coventry as well. But you just don't know which Norwich are going to turn up, and that's what worries me. If we see the Norwich that went to Blackburn on Good Friday and played them off the park and won 2-0, then that worries me. But then if we see the Norwich City that are a little bit blunt, that drew with Rotherham at home on Easter Monday, then I don't really have any qualms. But the worry is which one's going to turn up. But we just need to focus on ourselves. Back at the Riverside, as we say, Borough looking to avenge the defeat of Burnley and get back on the winning trail, really. I think that after 2 defeats and a draw, the aim has to be to win this one. And I think that a win in this game would be massive for our hopes of securing third or fourth spot, really, and getting that home tie in the second leg of the playoffs. I think I'm not even going to tempt fate with a prediction that should we win this game, then it may lead to whatever. But yeah, it's massive, and a win would be a massive statement of intent that, look, we're in the playoffs, and any team that faces us is going to have a horrible game. I just hope that Borough make it easy in this final 5 games for ourselves, win this game, and then hopefully my heart rate can rest a little bit.
Yeah, I think, as you say, look, even despite Sky seemingly desperately wanting to sort of keep our name amongst the automatic promotion conversation. I think every realist knows that it's just completely over now. As we said actually last week, if it's going to be anyone, it looks like we could potentially apply some pressure and go all the way. But, Sheffield United, regardless of the defeat last night, are still in the driving seat. And our main goal now has completely shifted to securing third or fourth spot and ensuring that we're in those playoffs. And I think, as you say, it's a big game almost to send a message to the teams in and around us, because although Sky might want to peddle the sort of automatic promotion narrative, I think the rest of the division might be thinking, oh, well, Middlesbrough have hit a little bit of a wobble here and it might be a good time to play them. And if we can turn up on Sky on Friday night and really send out a message, I think it'll sort of regain a little bit of that fear factor for the rest of the division. I think, as you say, don't really fancy coming up against Middlesbrough in the playoffs, and hopefully we can do that. Obviously, in terms of Norwich's threats, two players that Norwich fans are obsessed with at the moment, one of which is obviously Onel Hernandez, ex-Middlesbrough player. Quite interestingly, obviously last season he was allowed to join us on loan. Obviously Norwich were in the Premier League at that time, but spent the second half of the season out on loan at Birmingham. And then, I think a lot of Norwich fans may have thought that his time was sort of up there. But he's managed to work his way back into that team and is, by all accounts, doing extremely well at the moment. And also Gabriel Sara, who they spent big money on, from Brazil. And from my understanding, plays a little bit deeper in midfield, but seems to be scoring quite a few goals for them at the moment. So, yeah, they're two names to look out for. Obviously, Hernandez, we sort of know what he's about. And obviously, with him playing off the left, Tommy Smith is going to have to be on his A game, really.
Yeah, he is. And I think in Onel Hernandez, you have probably one of the most unpredictable players in the league, in the sense of, I don't even think that Onel Hernandez knows what he's going to do when he gets the ball. So yeah, he's a tricky player to deal with. Again, Sarah, probably one of their informed players, scored an absolute rocket on Good Friday. And usually you look at Norwich and you think, yeah, probably one of the sides in the Championship that are built on the foundations of a good defence, with usually either Tim Krul or Angus Gunn in goal, Max Aarons at right back, probably Dimi Yanulis at left back, and then your usual centre-half partnership of Hanley and Gibson. Interesting to see that both Hanley and Gibson were taken off injured on Good Friday, and both failed to make the squad for Easter Monday. So hopefully they're both injured once again. And the players that deputised on Easter Monday were Andrew Omobamidele, nearly
Good
butchered.
pronunciation.
There you go. Who is a young lad, played a few games for Norwich in the Premier League, but hopefully can be occupied. And the other lad who stepped in alongside him at centre-half was Jakob Lungi Sorensen, who is predominantly a left-back, quite small as well. So hopefully you can sort of occupy him with a physical presence. I think ideally you'd have Chuba Akpom pinned up against him, dealing with him, and with Omobamidele, you'd have Archer running the legs off him, because I think that in this game, in the context of the table, a draw doesn't really help Norwich at all. I think that they're going to be coming to the Riverside with the intention to win the game. And I think that, like most games, the first goal is massively important. If it goes to Norwich, it may be a difficult afternoon, an evening for Middlesbrough, because they'll probably sit in and be difficult to break down. But if Borough get that first goal, Norwich are the type of side to, well, press us high up the pitch. And if they want to do that, play long balls over the top of them every day of the week. And yeah, we'll hopefully have quite a comfortable evening. But yeah, 3 points is what we want desperately on Friday evening. And hopefully we get it. But yeah, once again, quick turnaround again for games. Borough Friday to Monday, and then Friday once again. So yeah, quick turnaround. Looking forward to getting back in the Riverside on Friday evening. Of course, it's our third last home game of the season, with Hull to come next week. And then, of course, we've got Coventry on the final day. But yeah, my penultimate home game of the season, having to go back to uni next week, so missing Hull. So yeah, hopefully we see a Middlesbrough win, a dominant display that cements ourselves in the playoffs and puts down a marker to the rest of the league that says, if you want some, come and get some.
Well, let's hope so, Nathan. Just a little bit of news to bring you. Actually, it's been announced whilst we've been recording. Nathan, I've seen you look down at your phone, as I did when we both got the notification. But it is the confirmation that Middlesbrough have basically been recognised by the EFL. And from what I understand, Michael Carrick is one of the nominees for manager of the season in the Championship. Chuba Akpom is being nominated for EFL Player of the Season alongside Josh Brownhill and Victor Gyökeres. And also Hayden Hackney has also been nominated for Young Player of the Season alongside Amad Diallo and Alex Scott. So we could have some awards coming our way. Listen, I think, truthfully, it'll probably be Scott that wins Young Player of the Season, just because there's that extra little bit of media hype around him.
Yeah.
Probably be Vincent Kompany for obvious reasons. But I do think if Chuba doesn't win Player of the Season, then something has gone seriously, seriously wrong. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. You look at the manager nominees, you see Kompany, who, I mean, they've won the league at an absolute canter and probably one of the best Championship teams that I've ever seen. It's probably got to be Kompany. Yeah, Carrick's done an unbelievable job. But his time scale's been shorter than the other managers. And of course, Robbins has done a fantastic job as well, given Coventry found themselves well and truly up shit creek at the start of the season with their ownership. And then you look at the young players, yeah, Hackney, Scott and Diallo. Diallo cost 40 million quid when he was about 16. So he wants to be on that list just based off that. Alex Scott, yeah, the media hype is probably going to win him that award. And he's probably going to, well, he will get a move to the Premier League in the summer. There's no doubt about that. And yeah, Hayden Hackney, his performances, I'm glad that they've been recognised, because he's been a revelation since he came into the side, firstly under Leo, but then under Michael Carrick, he's just got better and better. And then finally, the Player of the Season. There is simply no debate. There's no point putting up other nominations. Josh Brownhill, yeah, might have been influential for Burnley, but come on. Gyökeres, he's a striker. He's played 6 more games than Akpom, and he scored eight goals less. And Chuba doesn't even play as a striker. He plays as a number 10. There's simply zip debate in this argument, I suppose. Dubrakpom's the Championship Player of the Season, and I look forward to having his card on FIFA.
Yeah, I think most Middlesbrough fans, their FIFA players, are all waiting for that one to drop. Just a little bit of a news line there to bring you whilst we're recording. And a sign of the improvement that we've made this season. Listen, I think automatic promotion is done and dusted now. But as I'm always going to remind everyone that listens to this podcast or watches it, you'd have absolutely snapped anyone's hand off for playoffs and potentially playoffs with a second leg at home after Gyökeres had just dunked on Chris Wilder. You've always got to finish the podcast by putting a positive spin on it, regardless of if the Easter period didn't go just as we'd envisaged that it might do. But yes, that's enough from us both now. I hope you haven't heard my stomach rumbling. I'm absolutely starving, to be honest, Nathan. So we're going to leave it there and hopefully be back next week with victory live on Sky and 3 points to discuss. So yeah, as always, if you have watched on YouTube, be sure to like the video and subscribe, and do subscribe also on your audio platforms. But from me and Nathan, that has been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast, and thank you ever so much for watching and listening.